Section 2.6 is actually the last section in Chapter 2, which is pretty exciting. And it's introducing us to some algebra, so how we can go beginning solving equations. What's nice is that it's only one step, okay? So like you're only going to move one number over. There's not going to be a lot going on. When we get into 3.1, there's a little bit more, but that's not until the next lesson after our test, all right? So let's look at what's going on. It says, an equation contains an equal sign while an expression does not. We simplify expressions and we solve equations. And that's something to kind of pay note of. Everything we've done up until now, notice there's been no equals. We've just been gathering the numbers and doing the operations. So we've been simplifying. But when you have an equation that has an equal sign, you're solving this unknown, okay? So the first example is something that we've actually been doing all along. It's if somebody was doing their math and they say, hey, I think negative 2 is a solution to this equation, we can check it by plugging negative 2 in, doing the math, and making sure the left side equals the right side, all right? So we're going to have negative 4 times x, which is negative 2, minus 3, and the question is, does that equal 5? And I put a question mark there because we don't know. We don't know if that equals 5, and so we put a question mark until we're able to do it. Let 5 hang out, okay? Let 5 hang out, and we're going to focus on the left-hand side and clean it up, and if it equals 5, we'll say yes. If it doesn't, we'll say no. So the first order of operations, I know it looks like we have a bunch of subtraction going on, but we don't. This is multiplication. So what do we know about a negative times a negative? Positive. And what's 4 times 2? 8. So the question is 8 minus 3 equal 5? And it does, right? So 5 equals 5. We can put a check mark, and we would say, yes, that is a solution. Okay? If you got anything else other than 5 on that left-hand side, you would say, no, that's not a solution. All right? So the rest of the section has us actually solving, but we don't solve ones that difficult. We're just going to move one number over either by adding or subtracting or multiplying or dividing. So let's look at this. They have to give you with crazy numbers first, all right? So the first says if you have something equals something. So if you have A plus B, or A equals B, as long as you add C to one side, you can add C to the other side, and it keeps the scale balanced. I literally think of it as a scale, right? If you have 5 pounds and 5 pounds, those are equal, but if you add 5 more pounds over here, it's okay as long as you add 5 more pounds over here. You're always just going to even out. So basically, whatever you do to the left, make sure you do to the right, okay? And this is the same thing. If you subtract a certain amount of weight on one side, just make sure you subtract the same amount of weight on the other side. What we're going to do, guys, is we always want to get the variable by itself. So we want to get y by itself. And how we get it by itself is we move anything that's on the same side of the equal sign by the opposite operation, because you want to cancel things out, okay? So there's some number out there that when you subtract 6, it equals negative 2. What number is it? Well, what's the opposite of subtracting 6? Adding 6. So if we add 6 to the left, we add 6 to the right. Okay? Did we do anything to y? No. So guess who's still there? The y. What is a negative 6 plus a positive 6? 0. It cancels out. That's why we did it, right? So that just cancels out. And then you have this. What is a positive 6 plus a negative 2? Well, that's something where we learned it last Tuesday. Anytime you add opposite signs, you're really doing what? Subtracting. What's 6 minus 2? 4. And what sign are we going to have? A positive 4 because the 6 is positive. So we solved it, guys. We figured out what number that if you subtract 6, you get negative 2. And that's right. You can check it. 4 minus 6 is really 4 plus a negative 6, which equals negative 2. All right? That's what we did. I use the word nice, my air quotes. I think equations are nice because you can't always check them. When you're doing all this stuff on your worksheet and you're just simplifying, you don't know if you're doing it right or wrong. You're getting a number and you're hoping it's right. You can always check your equation by plugging that solution back in and making sure the left equals the right. All right, over here, we want to get z by himself. So who's in his way? The 8, right? And he's added. So what's the opposite of adding? Subtracting. So we want to get him away from this side. But to keep the equation balanced, if we're going to subtract it off on the right, we're going to subtract it off to the left. All right? What is negative 2 minus 8? If you need to write it over here like we've been doing, and then rewrite it as an addition problem, that's fine, okay? We haven't really been doing it vertically, have we? So negative 2 stays the same. The subtraction changes to a plus. The 8 changes to the opposite. So really what we're doing is we're adding two numbers of the same sign, which I like. It's just simply adding and giving it the sign they share. So what is negative 2 plus negative 8? Negative 10. Over here, did we touch the z? Nope, he's still there. And what happens when you have an 8 minus an 8? It cancels out. And again, we can always check it by plugging this in. What's negative 10 plus 8? At negative 2. We know we did it right. Do you have to check it? No, but I always say if you have plenty of time on the test, it's good to check your answers. Oh gosh, there's a lot going on here, but believe it or not, guys, this is the easier of all the problems because guess what's already isolated? Yeah, he's already where we want him. So all we need to do is just do the math on the right to get one number, okay? So order of operations, we're going to add these two first. What do you do when you add opposite signs? You really subtract. So what's the difference between 90 and 2? I heard it. Say it louder. 88, right? Is it going to be a positive 88 or a negative 88? Positive because the 90 is positive. But we still have plus the negative 100. When you add opposite signs, really what are you doing? Subtracting. So here, if you need to go over here and borrow, that's fine, okay? He wants to borrow from the 10, so that goes to 9. He goes to 10. So what are we left with? 12? Is that okay? I know I did that quick. 10 minus 8 is 2. I had to borrow from the 10 to make it 9. Is it going to be 12 or negative 12? Why? Because the 100's the negative.
How did you get 88?
90 minus 2.
Oh.
Is that okay? So I borrowed. So I combined the first two terms, Tanya, the 90 and the minus 2 there. And since they're opposite signs, I subtracted. So that one was nice because we didn't have to do any moving over. We just had to simplify. I know that was quick, but are there any questions? Did you say this is so easy? Isn't it nice? Because a lot of you have seen algebra before, and you've seen more intense algebra than this. Mm-hmm. So like when you go back to this kind of simple form, it's like, oh, I can handle this stuff. All right. Guess what? Objective C is the same idea, but instead of adding or subtracting to do the opposite maneuver, we're just going to multiply or divide, okay? So how do you undo, if you multiply one side, you multiply the other. So how do you undo multiplication? You divide, and vice versa, okay? So looking at this, we want to get the y by itself. So that 3 is in its way, but what multiplication? Oh, I just told you the answer. What's the operation that's bugging us? Multiplication. What's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So we're going to divide by 3 on the left, but if you divide by 3 on the left, we have to divide by 3 on the right. What do we know about any number divided by itself? It's just 1, and who still remains? The y. What's a negative divided by a positive? Negative. And what's an 18 divided by a 3? 6. And again, if you want to check it, you can just do, what is 3 times negative 6? Negative 18. So we know we found the right answer there. Over here, again, we want to get the x by itself, but what operation is this? Multiplication, so what do we need to do? Divide by 8. It's basically the exact same problem, right? They just flipped where the variable was. All right. On here, what's a negative divided by a positive? A negative. What's 32 divided by 8? 4. It is 4, so that's negative 4. Over here, 8 divided by 8 is just 1, so we have x. Some of us don't like it with that variable on the right, but you can write it, since it's an equation, you can write x equals negative 4. Right? We can flip-flop it. And again, if you want to check it, what's 8 times negative 4? Negative 32. We know we've done the right math. All right, last one. All these are like exactly the same. Divide by 3 because we want to get y by itself, but if you divide by 3 on the left, you divide by 3 on the right. On the left, the 3's cancel out because 3 divided by 3 is just 1. You're left with y. On the right, what are you guys left with? 9. Not 9, but negative 9 because we have a negative divided by a positive. Over here, I'm just going to check it real quick. What's 3 times negative 9? A positive times a negative is negative. 3 times 9 is negative 27. Woohoo! All right. This one's not as common, but it's just as easy, guys. We're so used to having that multiplication, and to undo multiplication, you divide. Well, then it's just the opposite. This is technically division. So how do you undo division? You multiply. And it's not as common. People freak out when they see it. But I'm like, guys, you know how to do it. So what we want to do is we want to get the x by itself. So we want to multiply both sides by -4. Okay? Why? Because on the left, we still have that -4 over a -4. It cancels out to just be that x. And then what's 7 times -4? -28. Why do we know it's negative? Because the positive times a negative is negative. And then 7 times 4 is 28. Again, guys, I'm going quick, but if you need to go off to the side and do multiples of 4, I like to check my answer. What's -28 divided by -4? A negative divided by a negative is positive. 28 divided by 4 is 7. Whew! Again,